my name is Hazel Mitchell, and I am 32 years old. That morning, I woke up with butterflies in my stomach. Our gender reveal party was finally happening. Despite Eric's distant behavior lately, I believed our baby would bring us closer again. As a pediatric nurse, becoming a mother was my dream coming true. I smoothed my dress over my baby bump, trying to ignore the nagging worry about Eric's strange mood these past weeks. I had no idea my world was about to shatter and rebuild in a single afternoon. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how I turned the worst moment of my life into my greatest triumph. Eric and I met at my college roommate's wedding 5 years ago. I was a bridesmaid, and he was a groomsman. We locked eyes across the dance floor during the reception, and it felt like one of those movie moments where everything else fades away. Eric was tall with dark hair and the kind of confident smile that made you feel special when directed at you. He approached me with 2 glasses of champagne and a joke about how we were the only 2 people not crying during the ceremony. We danced until my feet hurt, and when he asked for my number at the end of the night, I didn't hesitate. Our first date was the following weekend, a picnic in the park where we talked for hours. Eric was a real estate developer, ambitious and charismatic. He told me about growing up in Boston, his dreams of building a company that would change the skyline of major cities. I shared my journey through nursing school and my passion for pediatric care. 8 months later, Eric proposed during a weekend getaway to a beachside cottage. It was sunset, and he had arranged for lanterns to be lit along the shore. I said yes before he even finished asking. We were married 3 months after that in a beautiful ceremony with our closest friends and family. Everyone said we were rushing, but when you know, right? The first 2 years of marriage were everything I'd dreamed of. Eric was attentive and loving. We bought a beautiful 2-story colonial in the suburbs with a big backyard perfect for the family we planned to have. Our home became the gathering place for dinner parties and holiday celebrations. We complemented each other perfectly, or so I thought. I managed our home life while supporting Eric as his business grew. He made me feel secure and cherished. We decided to start trying for a baby after our 2nd anniversary. I'd always wanted to be a mother, and Eric seemed enthusiastic about becoming a father. He talked about teaching our future kids to play baseball and taking family vacations to Disney World. But month after month, those hopeful pregnancy tests came back negative. The first year of trying, we stayed optimistic. "It'll happen when it happens," Eric would say, holding me when I cried after my period arrived. But as we moved into the 2nd year, something changed. The disappointment became routine, and the emotional toll started affecting our marriage. Sex became scheduled rather than spontaneous. I tracked ovulation and basal body temperatures, turning what should have been intimate moments into clinical procedures. We saw fertility specialists who ran tests and found no obvious issues. Unexplained infertility was our diagnosis. The doctor suggested we consider IVF, but the cost was substantial. Eric was hesitant, saying his business was going through a temporary cash flow issue. I offered to use my savings, but he insisted we wait a few more months. Then, just when I had started researching adoption options, it happened. My period was late. I waited 3 anxious days before taking a test, afraid to hope. When those 2 pink lines appeared, I collapsed on the bathroom floor in tears of joy. I wrapped the test in a small box with a pair of baby booties I'd been secretly keeping in my drawer and presented it to Eric that evening. His reaction wasn't what I expected. There was joy, yes, but also something else, a flash of what looked like panic quickly masked by a smile. He hugged me and said all the right things, but something felt off. I dismissed it as shock or maybe fear about the responsibility of parenthood. Everyone gets nervous, right? As my pregnancy progressed, Eric's behavior became increasingly distant. He started staying later at the office, missing doctor's appointments due to unavoidable meetings, and showing less interest in nursery plans or baby names. When I brought up his detachment, he blamed work stress. His company was expanding into commercial properties, and he claimed the pressure was intense. I tried to be understanding. I left dinner in the oven for him, stopped calling his office when he was late, and learned to hide my hurt when he placed a distracted hand on my growing belly during ultrasounds. I told myself it would get better once the baby arrived, that seeing our child would awaken the loving husband I knew was still there. At 20 weeks, my doctor asked if we wanted to know the baby's gender. I had a different idea, a gender reveal party. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to rekindle Eric's excitement about becoming a father. When I suggested it, he shrugged and said, "Whatever makes you happy, Hazel." Not exactly enthusiastic, but not a rejection either. I took it as a win and threw myself into planning. I had no idea that Eric had already set his own plans in motion, plans that would blindside me in front of everyone we loved. The morning of our gender reveal party dawned bright and clear, a perfect early summer day. I'd been up since 6, too excited to sleep despite the increasing discomfort of my pregnancy. I stood in our kitchen surveying the supplies spread across the countertops, blue and pink paper plates, gender-neutral yellow cups and napkins, and ingredients for the finger foods I'd planned. Our backyard had been transformed over the previous day. A white tent stood on the lawn, with tables arranged underneath. Blue and pink streamers twisted from the tent poles, and balloons in both colors were clustered at strategic points. A large banner reading "Boy" or "Girl" hung across the back of the tent. The centerpiece was a table for the cake, the magical cake that only our baker and my doctor knew the secret of. Inside would be either blue or pink filling, revealing our baby's gender when we cut into it. I had also arranged for confetti cannons as a backup reveal method. The party store had prepared them based on the sealed envelope from my doctor. Everything was orchestrated for the perfect moment. My best friend Amber arrived first, letting herself in with the spare key and finding me trying to reach a serving platter on a high shelf. "What are you doing?" she scolded, rushing over to take the step stool away from me. "You're pregnant, remember? Let me get that." Amber had been my rock throughout the pregnancy, especially as Eric became more distant. A kindergarten teacher with a no-nonsense attitude and fierce loyalty, she'd been suspicious of Eric's behavior for weeks. "Where's Mr. Wonderful this morning?" she asked, arranging cucumber sandwiches on the rescued platter. "He had to run to the office for a bit. He promised he'd be back before guests arrive at 1, I explained, ignoring her raised eyebrow. "Has he been any better this week?" she asked carefully. I busied myself with the fruit salad. "He's just stressed about work. Things will improve once the baby comes." Amber looked unconvinced, but dropped the subject as my parents' car pulled into the driveway. My father, Richard, a retired high school principal with silver hair and kind eyes, immediately enveloped me in a gentle hug, while my mother, Diane, fussed over my appearance. "You're glowing, sweetheart," Dad said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You look tired," Mom countered, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Are you getting enough rest? And where's Eric?" "Work emergency," I replied, the excuse sounding hollow even to my own ears. "He'll be here soon." Dad frowned but said nothing, instead asking how he could help. Soon he was hanging the last of the decorations while Mom reorganized my appetizer layout with military precision. By noon, Amber, my parents, and I had transformed the house and yard into a gender reveal wonderland. I checked my phone for the 5th time, no messages from Eric. I sent him a text, "Everything's ready. Guests arriving in an hour. You'll be home soon, right?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared before his message came through. Got held up. "We'll try to make it on time." The knot in my stomach tightened. Try to make it? To his own baby's gender reveal? I plastered on a smile as I showed my mother the party games I'd planned, guess the baby's weight, old wives' tales prediction charts, and a suggestion board for baby names. All the while, I kept glancing at the door, willing Eric to walk through it. By 1 o'clock, guests began arriving. Danielle, my younger sister, came with her husband and 2-year-old son. Eric's parents, Grace and Thomas, arrived looking uncomfortable. They'd always been formal people and party games weren't their style, but they made an effort for the occasion. Several of my nursing colleagues carpooled together, bearing gifts despite my insistence that this wasn't a baby shower. A few of Eric's business associates and their wives arrived, offering polite congratulations while eyeing the empty space beside me. Where's the daddy-to-be became the question of the hour, each time stabbing a little deeper as I made excuses about important meetings and traffic. Amber stayed by my side, fielding questions and directing guests to refreshments when she sensed my discomfort growing. My father kept checking his watch with increasing disapproval, while my mother fluttered around, overcompensating for Eric's absence with excessive cheerfulness. At 1:30, with the party in full swing and still no Eric, I retreated to the kitchen for a moment alone. I leaned against the counter, one hand on my swollen belly, fighting back tears. This should have been one of the happiest days of our lives, and he couldn't even bother to show up on time. Everything okay in here? Danielle appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned. I straightened up, wiping away a stray tear. Just pregnancy hormones. I'm fine. He's not worth your tears, Hazel, she said softly. I've never said anything because you seemed happy, but... She was interrupted by a commotion from the living room. Eric's voice carried through the house, greeting guests with a charm that had been absent at home for months. Relief and anger battled within me as I smoothed my dress and prepared to face my husband. He stood in the center of the living room, immaculate in a light blue button-down and khakis, working the room like a politician. When he saw me, his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "There's my beautiful wife," he announced, crossing to kiss my cheek. The gesture felt performative, especially when he barely placed his hand on my belly, a touch so brief it could have been accidental. "You made it," I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied, but something in his expression made my heart sink. There was a determination there, a resolve that seemed out of place for a joyous occasion. As guests migrated to the backyard for the main event, Eric kept his distance, checking his phone frequently and engaging in hushed conversations I couldn't quite hear. Once, I caught him speaking intensely with his business partner, Lawrence, their discussion ending abruptly when they noticed me approaching. Despite Eric's strange behavior, I was determined to make this moment special. The cake was in position, the confetti cannons ready. Our future was about to take shape in pink or blue, and nothing would ruin this day. Or so I thought. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please," I called out, standing beside the cake table. The chatter died down as our 30-something guests gathered around. The afternoon sun filtered through the tent, casting a warm glow over the expectant faces. "Thank you all for coming to share this special moment with us," I continued, my heart racing with excitement despite the tension with Eric. "As you know, Eric and I have been on quite the journey to get here." Supportive murmurs rippled through the crowd. My mother wiped away a tear while my father stood tall and proud beside her. "In just a moment, we're going to cut this cake and finally learn if we're having a little boy or girl," I explained, gesturing to the beautifully decorated cake. It was a masterpiece of neutral yellow fondant with question marks in both blue and pink. I searched the crowd for Eric, finding him near the back, still checking his phone. "Eric," I called, extending my hand, "would you join me for the big reveal?" All eyes turned to him. He seemed to hesitate before pocketing his phone and making his way to the front. His smile was tight, his posture stiff as he took his place beside me. "On the count of 3, we'll cut the cake together," I said, handing him the knife and placing my hand over his. The gesture felt symbolic of our partnership, of the family we were creating together. The guests began counting down enthusiastically. 3, 2, 1. But as I moved to guide the knife toward the cake, Eric pulled away. A confused murmur passed through the crowd. I looked at him questioningly, embarrassment heating my cheeks. "Before we do this," Eric said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent yard, There's something I need to address. My stomach dropped as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. The atmosphere shifted instantly, the festive mood evaporating like morning dew under a harsh sun. "Hazel," he said, his voice detached and formal, "I've tried to find the right time for this, but there's never a good moment for these things." He extended the envelope toward me. With trembling hands, I took it, already knowing something terrible was inside. The crowd watched in uncomfortable silence as I opened the flap and pulled out a stack of legal documents. The words "petition for dissolution of marriage" jumped out from the first page in bold, unforgiving type. The world tilted sideways. Divorce papers. At our baby's gender reveal. "I can't do this anymore," Eric announced, not just to me but to our entire gathering of friends and family. "This marriage was a mistake from the beginning, and this baby," he gestured dismissively toward my belly, "has only made it clear that I'm trapped in a life I never wanted." Gasps and murmurs erupted around us. My mother let out a small cry of outrage, while Amber stepped forward as if to intervene. I raised a hand to stop her, needing to hear everything despite the pain slicing through me. "You're serving me divorce papers at our baby's gender reveal?" I finally managed to say, my voice barely audible. "I wanted witnesses," Eric replied coldly. "So you can't twist what happened later." I'm being clear about my intentions in front of everyone we know. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. He'd planned this humiliation, timed it for maximum impact. 5 years of marriage, and this is how you choose to end it? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "The timing is unfortunate," he conceded without a hint of genuine regret, "but with the baby coming, we needed clarity on where we stand." "And we stand apart, Hazel." Eric turned to address our stunned guests. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this, but Hazel has a flair for emotional manipulation, and I needed to be direct." The pregnancy was unexpected and, frankly, suspicious in its timing given our discussions about my uncertainties in this marriage. The insinuation that I had somehow trapped him with a pregnancy we'd been trying to achieve for 2 years was the final insult. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not with his smug face, watching for my breakdown. My sister pushed through the crowd, fury etched on her face. "You absolute coward," she spat at Eric. "You couldn't do this privately? You had to humiliate her in front of everyone." Eric's business partner Lawrence looked profoundly uncomfortable, while Eric's parents stood frozen in apparent shock. My father was being physically restrained by my mother, his face purple with rage. "I think it's best if I leave now," Eric said, checking his watch as if this were nothing more important than a mildly unpleasant business meeting running long. "My lawyer will be in touch about the arrangements. I'll provide appropriate financial support for the child, of course, pending paternity confirmation." Another dagger to my heart. Now he was questioning if the baby was even his. Eric began walking toward the house, parting the crowd of speechless guests. His posture was relaxed, shoulders loose, as if he'd just set down a heavy burden. He'd orchestrated this entire scene, the late arrival, the public setting, the shocking accusations, all to control the narrative and walk away looking like the reasonable one. I stood alone by the forgotten cake, divorce papers in one hand, the unused knife in the other. Humiliation and rage coursed through me in equal measure. The beautiful day I'd planned lay in ruins around me, my marriage shattered in the cruelest way imaginable. But as I watched Eric's retreating back, something shifted inside me. A week ago, I'd made a discovery that had shaken me to my core. Information I'd held back, hoping against hope that our marriage could be saved for our baby's sake. Now, with the divorce papers in my hand and my husband's public betrayal still echoing in the air, I realized there was nothing left to save, and no reason left to keep his secrets. The divorce papers trembled in my hand as I watched Eric striding confidently toward the exit. Time seemed to slow as my mind raced through the events of the previous week, a discovery I'd made that changed everything. It had started with a simple task. Eric had asked me to email a contract from his laptop while he was in the shower. Nothing unusual, as I'd done this for him many times before. But when I opened his email to attach the document, a message notification popped up from someone named Rebecca, with the subject line, "Our weekend." Something in my gut twisted. I knew Rebecca was his new assistant, a recent hire he'd mentioned with unusual frequency. Before I could think better of it, I clicked on the message. "Last weekend was amazing," it read. "Can't wait to see you again at the cabin. Same excuse as before? Love, R." My hands had gone numb as I scrolled through their conversation history. Messages going back 3 months revealed an affair in vivid, painful detail. Plans for secret meetings, intimate photographs, declarations of feelings, all while I was experiencing morning sickness and planning for our baby's future. But that wasn't all I found. In my shock state, I began opening other folders, looking for I don't know what, perhaps evidence that this was all some misunderstanding. Instead, I uncovered financial documents that made no sense to me at first, transfers to offshore accounts, falsified investment reports, and emails to clients that clearly misrepresented properties and returns. I'd sat there for what felt like hours, piecing together the truth. Eric wasn't just cheating on me, he was embezzling money from his investors and company. The cash flow issues that had delayed our fertility treatments weren't real. He'd been siphoning money into hidden accounts while building a separate life with his assistant. I'd copied everything to a USB drive almost on autopilot, then closed the laptop and placed it exactly as I'd found it. When Eric emerged from the shower, I pretended everything was normal, making excuses about needing to lie down because of pregnancy fatigue. For a week, I'd carried this knowledge, unsure what to do. I'd convinced myself that confronting him would only make things worse, that maybe after the baby came, he'd remember what was important. I'd been a coward, afraid of facing a future as a single mother. But now, watching him walk away after humiliating me in front of everyone we knew, something hardened inside me. The fear disappeared, replaced by a cold clarity. "Eric," I called out, my voice stronger than I expected. "Wait." He turned, annoyance flashing across his face at this deviation from his planned exit. Our guests stood in uncomfortable silence, witnesses to the unfolding drama. "You forgot something," I said, setting down the divorce papers on the cake table. Eric frowned. "Whatever it is, have your lawyer contact mine." "Oh, this isn't about lawyers," I replied, taking a step toward him. "This is about honesty. Since you're so concerned about having witnesses to avoid my emotional manipulation, let's make sure everyone has the full picture." A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "Hazel, don't make this worse than it already is." I laughed, the sound surprising even me. "Worse? Than serving divorce papers at our baby's gender reveal? I'm not sure that's possible, but let me try." I turned to face our guests, who watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. "Since Eric wanted you all here for this moment, you should know everything. First, the baby news, which, despite what my husband implied, we tried for over 2 years to conceive." My hand rested protectively on my belly as I continued. "I actually found out some additional information at my last appointment that I was saving for today." I looked directly at Eric. "It's not just a baby, Eric. It's babies. Twins. Identical twin boys." Eric's expression faltered, the smugness giving way to shock. Several guests gasped, and I heard my mother's soft, "Oh my goodness." "But that's not all I discovered recently," I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Last week, while using Eric's laptop to send a work email for him, I found some interesting correspondence between my husband and his assistant, Rebecca." Eric's face drained of color. "Hazel, stop it. Now." "Rebecca and Eric have been having an affair for the past 3 months, I announced, watching his confident facade crumble. "They've been meeting at his company's lakeside property, the same property that, according to the financial documents I also found, doesn't officially exist in his company's portfolio because the money used to purchase it was embezzled from investor funds. The yard erupted in murmurs. Eric's business partner Lawrence stepped forward, his face a mask of controlled fury. "What are you talking about, Hazel?" "Ask him about Sunset Properties LLC," I said, never taking my eyes off Eric, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. "Ask him where the Henderson investment actually went, or why the Westlake Development's budget suddenly doubled with no explanation." Eric lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "Shut up," he hissed. "You don't know what you're talking about." My father and Amber moved simultaneously, positioning themselves on either side of me. Eric released my arm as if burned. "I have copies," I said calmly, "of everything. The emails, the transfers, the falsified reports. All safely stored with my lawyer as of yesterday." This was a bluff. I hadn't actually contacted a lawyer yet, but Eric had no way of knowing that. His eyes darted around the yard, calculating his rapidly diminishing options. "She's making this up," he said desperately, looking to his parents. "She found out about Rebecca and she's trying to destroy me." "Am I?" I asked. "Then you won't mind explaining the $3 million in the Cayman account? Or the property purchased under Rebecca's grandmother's name with investor funds?" I'm sure Lawrence and the SEC would love to hear those explanations. Lawrence stepped closer to Eric, his voice low but carrying in the tense silence. "We're going to have a conversation. Now." Eric's phone began ringing. He pulled it out, and I caught a glimpse of Rebecca's name on the screen before he declined the call with trembling fingers. "You've ruined everything," he said to me, his voice a mixture of fury and fear. I shook my head slowly. "No, Eric. You did that all on your own. I may be having twins, but you're the one who's truly expecting prison time for fraud." The backyard fell into a stunned silence after my revelation. Eric stood frozen, his carefully constructed image crumbling before everyone's eyes. For a moment, it seemed like he might lunge at me again, but Lawrence moved between us, his stance protective despite the shock evident on his face. "We should discuss this inside," Eric finally said, trying to regain control of the situation. His voice had lost its earlier confidence, replaced by a strained attempt at authority. "There's nothing to discuss," I replied, surprised by my own steadiness. "And I think we've had enough private conversations." "You wanted witnesses, remember." Eric's parents approached slowly, his mother Grace's face a mask of confusion and dismay. "Eric, what is Hazel talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's complicated, Mom," Eric answered, not meeting her eyes. "Business matters you wouldn't understand." "And as for the other accusation?" "Hazel's obviously upset about the divorce and lashing out." His father Thomas, a retired judge known for his strict moral code, stepped forward. "Are you denying the affair?" he asked directly, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent evaluating testimonies. Eric hesitated a fraction too long. "Dad, this isn't the time or place." "It appears your wife didn't choose the time or place either," Thomas interrupted coldly. "Answer the question, son." The dynamic shifted visibly as Eric realized he'd lost his parents' unconditional support. His phone rang again, Rebecca's name flashing insistently. This time, he shut it off completely. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Hazel, can we please speak privately? We can work something out." "Like you worked something out with your investors?" Lawrence interjected, his professional composure cracking to reveal genuine anger. $3 million, Eric? Into a personal account? Guests began murmuring among themselves, some discreetly moving toward the exit, others openly watching the confrontation unfold. My nursing colleagues clustered protectively near me, while Eric's business associates huddled together in worried conversation. Eric's strategy shifted from denial to damage control. He stepped closer, lowering his voice though still audible to those nearby. "Hazel, be reasonable. If what you're implying is true, and I'm not saying it is, going public hurts everyone. Think about the twins. They need a father with a reputation and career intact. The manipulation was so transparent, it almost made me laugh. They need a father with integrity, I corrected him. Something you've thoroughly proven you lack. Eric's face hardened. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you're doing. Those documents won't hold up legally. You obtained them without permission. And it'll be your word against mine about how you got them. Actually, Amber stepped forward, holding up her phone. I've been recording since you handed her the divorce papers, including your admission just now that the documents exist. Eric's eyes widened in panic. That's illegal without consent. Not in the state, my father said quietly. Single-party consent is all that's required. Something a real estate developer should know. The situation was spiraling beyond Eric's control. He looked around desperately, perhaps searching for an ally, finding none. Then his expression changed, a dangerous calculation replacing the panic. Fine, he said, his voice suddenly calm. If that's how you want to play this, remember that everything I've built is in my name. The house, the cars, the investments. You fight me on this, and you'll get nothing. You'll be a single mother of twins with no home and no income. Before I could respond, a commotion at the gate drew everyone's attention. A sleek black BMW had pulled up, and a woman with long blonde hair was hurrying up the garden path. Rebecca, Eric's assistant and mistress, appeared flushed and agitated as she spotted Eric in the crowd. Eric, I've been calling you nonstop, she exclaimed, either oblivious to or unconcerned about the gathering. The Kingston investors are at the office. They're asking questions about the fund allocations and threatening to go to the authorities if they don't get answers immediately. The color drained from Eric's face as Rebecca realized her mistake, finally taking in the scene, the gender reveal decorations, the stunned guests, my pregnant belly, and the divorce papers still lying on the table. Oh, she said softly, comprehension dawning. I didn't realize. Lawrence stepped forward, his expression grim. The Kingston investors, you said? The ones whose retirement funds Eric personally guaranteed were being used for the Westlake development. Rebecca's eyes darted nervously between Eric and Lawrence. I shouldn't have. It's too late for that, Lawrence cut in, pulling out his phone. If the Kingstons are asking questions, others will be too. I need to contact our legal team immediately. Eric made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. He strode toward me, his voice low and threatening. This isn't over, Hazel. You have no idea what I'm capable of. My sister Danielle moved to my side instantly. That sounded an awful lot like a threat, she said loudly. Made in front of a yard full of witnesses, including a retired judge. Eric's father placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder. That's enough, he said, his voice laden with disappointment. You're coming with us now, before you make things worse for yourself. For a moment, Eric seemed ready to resist, but the fight suddenly left him. The carefully constructed facade he'd maintained, successful businessman, wronged husband, had completely collapsed. All that remained was a cornered man facing the consequences of his actions. As Eric's parents led him toward their car, Rebecca trailing behind in confused distress, he turned back once more. His face was a mixture of anger and something else, perhaps the dawning realization of all he had lost. You've won nothing, he called out. When this is over, you'll regret it. I placed both hands on my belly, feeling a flutter of movement from within, my twin boys, unaware of the drama surrounding their impending arrival. The only regret I have, I replied clearly, is not seeing you for who you really are years ago. As Eric was ushered away, the remaining guests stood in awkward silence. The gender reveal cake sat untouched, its secret still hidden inside. Amber approached, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. Well, she said with forced lightness, I think we can safely say this is one gender reveal no one will ever forget. Despite everything, a small laugh escaped me. I looked around at the concerned faces of friends and family who had just witnessed the implosion of my marriage. I'm so sorry you all had to see this, I said. This isn't how I imagined today would go. Don't you dare apologize, my mother said firmly, coming to embrace me. You have nothing to be sorry for. Lawrence approached next, his expression serious. Hazel, about what you said regarding the financial irregularities, we need to talk. Soon. I nodded. Tomorrow. I'll bring everything I found. As guests began to awkwardly disperse, offering hugs and support, I found myself standing before the abandoned cake. After everything that had happened, it seemed almost trivial, and yet. We never did find out, did we? My sister said, coming to stand beside me. Find out what? I asked, momentarily confused. Danielle gestured to the cake. Whether you're having boys or girls, they already know it's twin boys, apparently. I smiled, my first genuine smile in what felt like days. We should at least cut the cake. No reason to waste a perfectly good dessert. Surrounded by my closest family and friends, the people who had stayed after the chaos, I picked up the knife. With steady hands, I cut into the cake, revealing a bright blue interior. Boys, I confirmed, as a small cheer went up from the remaining guests. 2 little boys who will never have to wonder if they're loved. 1 week after the gender reveal disaster, I sat in my parents' sunlit kitchen, nursing a cup of peppermint tea. The familiar surroundings, the worn oak table where I'd done my homework as a child, the collection of mismatched mugs my mother refused to part with, the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway provided a comfort I desperately needed. The 7 days since Eric's betrayal had been a whirlwind of legal consultations, police interviews, and emotional reckonings. My parents had insisted I stay with them temporarily, concerned about my stress levels affecting the pregnancy. Though I initially resisted, wanting to maintain independence, the first night alone in what had been our marital home quickly changed my mind. The emptiness had been overwhelming, Eric's presence lingering in every room, despite his physical absence. My phone buzzed with a text from Amber, outside with breakfast bagels and big news. Open up. Moments later, Amber bustled into the kitchen carrying a paper bag that smelled gloriously of fresh bread and coffee. Decaf for you, she said, setting a cup before me. And everything bagels with that cream cheese you've been craving. You're an angel, I said gratefully, already reaching for the bag. What's the news? Amber's expression turned serious as she sat down. Eric was arrested this morning. The bagel stopped halfway to my mouth. Arrested? Already? She nodded. Lawrence didn't waste any time. After you showed him those documents, he hired a forensic accountant who found even more evidence of fraud. Apparently, Eric has been embezzling for years, not just months. The SEC and FBI got involved, and with multiple investors filing complaints. I set the bagel down, my appetite suddenly diminished. Despite everything, hearing that Eric was in custody sent a complicated mix of emotions through me, vindication, but also sadness for what could have been. There's more, Amber continued. Rebecca is cooperating with investigators. Word is she's claiming she didn't know about the financial crimes, only participated in the affair. Do you believe her? I asked. Amber shrugged. Doesn't matter what I believe. But she's young, probably scared, and looking to save herself. Can't say I blame her. My phone began ringing, Eric's number flashing on the screen. This was his 3rd call since the arrest. I declined it, as I had the others. He keeps calling, I explained to Amber's questioning look. Probably wants me to bail him out or recant my statement. Or he's finally realized what an idiot he's been, she suggested. Either way, you don't owe him a conversation. The phone immediately rang again. This time, it was an unfamiliar number. Hello. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Mitchell? This is Patricia Westfield. I'm a partner at Westfield and Associates Family Law. The woman's voice was crisp and professional. Your friend Amber Harper suggested I call you. I glanced at Amber, who smiled encouragingly. Yes, thank you for calling, I replied, sitting straighter. I understand you're in need of representation for both a divorce and potentially as a witness in a financial crimes case, Patricia continued. I'd like to offer you a consultation at your earliest convenience. My office specializes in high-conflict divorces, particularly those involving financial deception. I appreciate that, but I should warn you, my financial situation is uncertain right now, I admitted. With all our assets potentially frozen due to the investigation, I had only my nursing salary and savings to rely on. Ms. Harper explained your circumstances, Patricia replied. Given the public nature of the case and the unusual situation, I'm prepared to work with you on a contingency basis. We can discuss details when we meet. After arranging an appointment for the following day, I hung up and looked at Amber in disbelief. How did you find her? My cousin used her during his divorce last year. Said she's a shark in a designer suit. Amber grinned. Exactly what you need right now. Later that afternoon, I returned to the house to collect more of my belongings. My father had offered to accompany me, but I needed to do this alone, to face the space that had once been my dream home but now felt tainted by betrayal. As I packed clothes and prenatal vitamins, the doorbell rang. Peering through the peephole, I was surprised to see Grace, Eric's mother, standing on the porch alone. I hesitated before opening the door. Our relationship had always been cordial but distant, with Grace maintaining the reserved politeness of someone who viewed emotional displays as weakness. Hazel, she said when I finally opened the door. She looked older than she had a week ago, new lines etched around her eyes. May I come in? I stepped aside, allowing her into the foyer. An awkward silence fell between us as she glanced around the house she'd visited countless times for holidays and dinner parties. Thomas and I have been doing a lot of thinking, she finally said. About Eric, about his upbringing, about the values we thought we instilled in him. You don't need to apologize for him, I said quietly. I'm not, she replied firmly. Eric made his choices as an adult. But I am here to tell you that Thomas and I stand with you, not him. What he did, both the affair and the financial crimes, is unforgivable. Her words stunned me. Grace and Thomas had always doted on their only son, often excusing his occasional selfishness as ambition. I also wanted you to know, she continued, that regardless of what happens with Eric, we consider those twins our grandsons. If you'll allow it, we would like to be part of their lives. Tears welled in my eyes at this unexpected offer of support. I'd like that, I managed to say. They should know their family, the good parts of it. Grace nodded, her own eyes suspiciously bright. Thomas has already started setting up a trust for them. One that Eric cannot touch, regardless of the outcome of his case. After Grace left, I finished packing in a daze. The day had brought unexpected allies and a glimpse of a future where I wouldn't be facing motherhood entirely alone. I placed a hand on my growing belly, feeling one of the twins kick in response. We're going to be okay, I whispered to them. We have people who love us. The following week brought my first ultrasound appointment since the gender reveal. I had rescheduled it twice, dreading going alone after imagining this moment with Eric for so long. But as I lay on the examination table, watching the technician set up the equipment, the door opened unexpectedly. Amber slipped in, followed by my sister Danielle and my mother. Hope you don't mind company, Amber said, taking the seat beside the ultrasound monitor. We figured you shouldn't have to do this alone. The technician smiled. More people to see the twins? Fine by me if it's okay with you. Mrs. Mitchell. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It's Ms. Mitchell now. And yes, it's more than okay. As the cold gel was applied to my belly and the wand moved across my skin, the room filled with the rapid whooshing sounds of 2 strong heartbeats. On the screen, 2 distinct profiles appeared, tiny faces, hands, and feet perfectly formed. There they are, the technician said. Twin boys, just as your doctor confirmed. Both measuring right on schedule. Strong heartbeats. Perfect little guys. My mother squeezed my hand as tears spilled down my cheeks, not tears of loss or betrayal this time, but of pure love for the two lives growing inside me. In that moment, looking at my sons and surrounded by the women who had rallied around me, I realized something profound. Eric had not taken everything from me. Far from it. He had, inadvertently, given me the chance to build something stronger than the life we'd shared, a life of authenticity, courage, and unconditional love. 6 months after the gender reveal that changed everything, I stood in the nursery of my new apartment, folding tiny blue onesies and arranging them in the dresser. My belly had grown enormous, housing my active twin boys who seemed to be practicing for Olympic gymnastics most nights. The doctor had scheduled a C-section for the following week, as both babies were stubbornly maintaining breech positions. The nursery, though smaller than the one I'd planned in our house, was filled with more love than I could have imagined. Friends and family had pitched in to create a space that was perfect for the twins: 2 matching cribs with woodland-themed bedding, a comfortable rocking chair, and walls painted a soothing sage green. Photographs of grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins hung in frames shaped like leaves on a family tree mural that Amber and Danielle had painted one weekend. My new apartment was in a family-friendly building not far from my parents' home. A 2-bedroom unit with large windows and a small balcony where I'd placed container gardens. It wasn't the spacious suburban house I'd shared with Eric, but it was mine, free from painful memories and deception. The past 6 months had been a crash course in rebuilding a life from its foundations. Patricia Westfield, my divorce attorney, had proven to be exactly the advocate I needed. When Eric's lawyers attempted to drag out proceedings and hide assets, she countered with evidence of his financial crimes and the testimony of multiple witnesses to his behavior at the gender reveal. The judge, unimpressed with Eric's attempts to control the narrative, had granted an expedited divorce due to the extraordinary circumstances and my advanced pregnancy. Eric's legal troubles had mounted quickly, with multiple investors coming forward and Rebecca providing damning testimony in exchange for immunity. He faced serious federal charges for wire fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. His bail had been set at an amount even he couldn't manage, resulting in his continued detention until trial. I hadn't seen him since that day in the backyard, though not for his lack of trying. He'd sent letters from jail, some pleading, others threatening, all of which Patricia had advised me to document and ignore. His final communication had arrived the previous week, a settlement offer that would grant me full custody of the twins in exchange for my refusal to testify about the financial documents I'd found. Patricia had delivered my response personally. I would not be silenced, and his parental rights would be determined by the court based on what was best for the children, not as a bargaining chip. Financially, things had been difficult but manageable. The court had frozen most of our marital assets pending the outcome of Eric's trial, but had released funds for my living expenses and medical care. I'd returned to part-time work at the pediatric ward until my maternity leave began, finding comfort in caring for other people's children while awaiting my own. A knock at the door interrupted my nesting. I waddled to answer it, finding Lawrence on the other side, holding a large gift bag. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, smiling warmly. "I wanted to drop this off before the babies arrive." I welcomed him in, touched by his continued support. After the initial shock of discovering his business partner's crimes, Lawrence had been nothing but kind to me, making sure I wasn't financially devastated by the scandal, and even offering me a character reference for my apartment application. "You didn't have to bring anything else," I said, gesturing to the gift. "You've already done so much." "This is different," he replied, handing me the bag. "It's something I thought you might want to have." Inside, I found a leather-bound document. Opening it revealed a trust agreement establishing educational funds for both twins. "The investors who recovered their money wanted to do something," Lawrence explained. "Many of them are parents and grandparents themselves. They know none of this was your fault." Tears threatened as I thanked him. It wasn't just the financial security the trust represented, but the reminder that goodness existed even in the aftermath of betrayal. After Lawrence left, I received another visitor, one I hadn't expected. Grace arrived carrying homemade lasagna and a shopping bag full of newborn necessities. I remember how little appetite I had for cooking after Thomas Jr. was born, she explained, placing the food in my refrigerator with practiced efficiency. And how quickly we went through diapers and wipes. Over tea, Grace shared news that Thomas had retired from his consulting work to focus on supporting me and preparing for his grandsons. They had sold their large house and bought a smaller one just 20 minutes away. "We want to be present," she said simply. Not intrusive, but available. It was a marked change from the formal in-laws I'd known, and I welcomed their transformation. The twins would need all the loving adults they could get. As my due date approached, I received word from Patricia that Eric had made one final attempt to contact me. He'd been moved to a minimum security facility pending trial and had petitioned for permission to be present at the birth. "He has no legal right," Patricia assured me. The judge denied his request immediately. "You won't have to see him." Part of me felt relief, while another part, a part one was still working to understand, felt a strange sadness for the father who would not witness his son's arrival. Not because he deserved to be there, but because the twins deserved a father who would move heaven and earth to be present for them. The day of my scheduled C-section arrived with surprising calm. My mother and Amber accompanied me to the hospital, while my father and sister waited anxiously in the family area. The procedure went smoothly, and at 10:17 and 10:19 a.m., Jackson Thomas and James Richard Mitchell entered the world with strong cries and healthy pink skin. Holding them for the first time, their tiny bodies against my chest, I felt a love so fierce and protective it took my breath away. They were perfect, Jackson with a tuft of dark hair like mine, James with a serious expression that reminded me of my father. "Hello, my brave boys," I whispered to them. "We've been through a lot together already, haven't we? But we made it." The weeks that followed were a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and precious little sleep. The twins proved to be as different in personality as they were identical in appearance, Jackson gregarious and demanding, James observant and patient. They brought joy not just to me but to the entire extended family that had rallied around us. Eric's trial began when the twins were 2 months old. I testified briefly, providing the documents I'd found and answering questions about our marriage and finances. Seeing him across the courtroom, thinner, subdued, his confident demeanor replaced by the haunted look of a man facing consequences, stirred complex emotions. Not regret or longing, but a kind of grief for what could have been, for the father my sons would never really know. The verdict came quickly, guilty on multiple counts. The sentence was substantial, 12 years with possibility of parole after 8. Not a life sentence, but long enough that the twins would be in elementary school before he could have any meaningful presence in their lives. Through Patricia, Eric sent one final communication, a request to meet his sons before beginning his sentence. After much reflection and consultation with a family therapist, I agreed to a brief, supervised visit at the courthouse. I brought the twins, dressed in matching blue rompers, to a small conference room where Eric waited with a court officer. His eyes filled with tears at the sight of them. "They're beautiful," he said softly, not reaching out to touch them as instructed. "They look like you." "Jackson has your chin," I replied, surprising myself with the observation. "And James gets his serious expressions from your side." For 15 carefully monitored minutes, Eric sat across from his sons, speaking softly to them about trivial things: the weather, how big they were getting, how he hoped they would be happy. As the visit ended, he finally looked directly at me. "I know it doesn't change anything," he said, "but I am sorry, Hazel. Not just for getting caught, but for everything. You deserved better." "I didn't come for your apology," I replied honestly. "I came because someday they might ask about you, and I wanted to be able to say I gave them every chance to know their father, even if you weren't able to be what they needed." As we prepared to leave, Eric asked, "Will you tell them about me?" "The truth, I mean." I considered the question carefully. An age-appropriate version, yes. I won't lie to protect your image, but I won't vilify you either. They'll know you made serious mistakes that had consequences. They'll also know that people are complicated and that your choices don't define them. That meeting proved to be our last. Eric began serving his sentence at a facility across the country, and while he sent occasional letters and birthday cards for the twins, he respected my boundaries and never attempted to manipulate or pressure me again. On the twins' first birthday, surrounded by friends and family who had become our village, I looked around at the life we had built from the ashes of betrayal. My sons were thriving, crawling everywhere, babbling constantly, secure in the knowledge they were deeply loved. I had returned to nursing part-time and was considering a specialization in neonatal care, inspired by our journey. The path to this moment had been unimaginably difficult, filled with public humiliation, legal battles, and countless tears. Yet standing there, watching Jackson smash cake into his hair while James methodically deconstructed his slice, I realized I wouldn't change what happened. The gender reveal that was meant to be a joyous announcement had instead revealed far more important truths about my marriage, about Eric's character, and most importantly, about my own strength. In trying to break me, Eric had inadvertently forced me to become unbreakable. I had learned that family isn't defined by legal documents or shared names, but by who shows up when everything falls apart. That starting over isn't failure, but sometimes the bravest choice you can make. That the most powerful response to public humiliation isn't revenge, but living well and truthfully. As I tucked my sons into their cribs that night, I whispered the promise I made them daily. You are loved. You are wanted. You are enough, exactly as you are. And so was I. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below. And if my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that even the most painful endings can lead to beautiful new beginnings. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the family we're born into.